It is my great pleasure to introduce Federica Bressan. She is a Marie Curie and Fulbright alumna and a science communicator and author based in Italy. She holds 2 master's degrees in music and musicology and a PhD in computer science. The vision underlining her work concerns the co-evolution of technology and society. She conducts video interviews on technology and society. She writes opinion pieces on science and communication and teaches podcasting for researchers. She is the author for over 40 peer-reviewed articles in the fields of engineering, chemistry, contemporary art, library science, and philology. Please, Federica, the floor is yours, and we will listen to you. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Angela. Thank you, everyone, for having me here today. It's a pleasure to share my experience, and I like to follow the speech before mine, because I think we're very much in line on the fact that the integration of gender in research needs to contribute to the actual cause. It doesn't have to be just a trend in academia, so it's very important to understand how to do it, why we're doing it, and to then, of course, execute it and possibly follow up on the results. What I'm going to say today is included in an article that I am going to link in the chat, and that hopefully will be also linked in some follow-up email, or it's online in any event if you Google my name with the title of the article, which is the Integration of Gender Analysis in Interdisciplinary Research, Challenges and Solutions of a Project on Multimedia Heritage. So I got a Marie Curie European Fellowship in 2015, which I executed, well, 15-16, which I executed between 2017 and 2019. I started preparing the first draft of the proposal in 2014. Now, this is many years ago. I wrote this article that I just linked that looks like this. It was a conference paper before, and then it became a journal article in 2019, I believe. So this is to say that this is not from just yesterday. Some things may have changed. I still believe, actually, that it's telling that I have been invited to speak today here, despite my grant now dating a few years back, because the literature coming from the fellows is virtually non-existing. And therefore, I want to warn you that some things may have changed with respect to what I'm about to say, including my literature of reference, of course, which may have been updated, including the Ljubljana document that was just mentioned. But the core of the experience, I'm sure it's still of value. So the experience that I'm going to share with you includes both the preparation of the proposal and then the execution of the project. The premise, of course, is that the contribution of women in research has been recognized to the point that the exclusion of women from research is considered an impoverishment of the research itself. We have just heard, and we know this, that including gender in your research is an added value, and it increases the impact of your research and the societal meaning of your research. But how to do it? When I was writing my proposal, I read the paragraph where the researchers, the applicants, were invited to integrate gender in their research. And, you know, I'm a zealous girl, I'm a good girl, I follow every instruction. So I said, well, let me think about it. If this helps my proposal, let me think about it. I had been interested in the topic years prior, but only then, when I needed to write my Marie Curie proposal, I started being systematic about it. And I said, okay, you know what? If this is about my research, it needs to be rigorous and methodic. I cannot just attach something to my research. You don't improvise research. So if I do this, it needs to belong to what we call science. It must not be an embellishment, and it must not be the embodiment of some propaganda. So how do I do this properly? Of course, being a scientist, I started educating myself. So you can imagine that I devoted quite some time to this issue. And I started researching literature, both scientific, both at policy level, and the documents at policy level that I studied, not just browsed through. I really studied that, are listed in the article that I linked. And that gave me the vocabulary. That made me see what the main issues within the world of gender are, what I could address, what I could contribute to. And then I connected with experts in the institution where I was then, in the institution that was my host institution for the Marie Curie. I just reached out in my network. And then I attended conferences, some, and I followed a ton of lectures online or otherwise. So I really dug deep into this topic. And still, I was quite confused. I didn't know exactly how to integrate this into my research. It seemed very apparent, what is not apparent at first, but was clarified in the speech before mine, which is you can integrate research in your research content or in how your research is managed in the research team, who you hire, who you work with, because you're not the institution, so that's not your problem. And as a researcher, as a Marie Curie fellow, you don't really have an impact at policy level directly. So what you can do is integrate gender in the content of your research, if applicable, if relevant, or in how your research is managed. And I thought about it hard, especially there are some non-gender related researches that make it easier to implement research. Actually, they should. If they don't, it's pretty obvious by now that they should. For example, crash test dummies for accidents in the car. Seat belts affect men and women differently, so you should take that into consideration. What about pregnant women? So the medical field is paramount for that. My research topic was about installation art and documentation and preservation of installation art. So how is that relevant? At first, I thought I would, go down hard on the problem and build my research project around gender. And so it was in the title, and I would only focus on works of art, installations of women artists. It affected every aspect of my project. And I received incredible support from anyone from the research office and anyone that was not in a gender studies department. When I went to them and connected to them to present my proposal and say, what do you think about it? I have received quite some resistance, and from them came the first questioning. They started asking, could you carry out this research without considering gender? Why are you considering gender? And that shocked me because I thought we were on the same team. I thought the starting point was that if I consider gender, this is an added value to my research. And I'm just trying ways to do it, not being an expert, but I'm trying because I educated myself and this is what I came up with. And I was a bit shocked by how much backlash I was receiving. Everybody was questioning me, why women artists? Like, because we should give more attention to women? Because if I just select the first that come up in my network, they're all men. And so I picked the women, but it was so arbitrary, it wasn't core to my research. And that also shocked me because when you have the woman, or depending on the ratio, more women in panels or so, it's a given fact today. You always expect that balance. They are included just because you need a woman in the panel. Nobody asks, could you have put together that panel without a woman? Well, of course you could have, but we are doing it for a reason, right? I thought we were on the same page. And so it was shocking for me to see that when I was really trying to integrate gender deeply into my project, I kept being questioned. One day I was invited from actually one body of the European Commission to participate in a video that was about gender and Horizon 2020 and the Marie Curie proposals, grants. And they reached out to me I'm not sure because I was the only one. I have a hard time believing that, but this is kind of what they said. The only one that tried to systematically include gender in her proposal, a proposal that was successful, of course, that year. And they were asking me, so what does including gender into your research do for you? What will it bring in the results that you couldn't have achieved without? And like, even you are questioning me, like, I don't know. I am exploring this. I don't know. And so I decided to cut down on the presence of gender in my research. And eventually I limited it to considering at least 40% of women in the case studies that I selected, and to give priority to the works of the women in my schedule. This reflected what the policies already in place called for, but it was nothing new, and it was not specific to my project, and it was not related to the content of my project. So I was quite disappointed because I did feel that it was arbitrary and doing very little for the cause. So when I started doing my grant, those 2 years, I asked myself, what more can I do? And by reflecting upon it, I came up with the idea that I could observe, I could collect data. I don't do gender studies, but I can observe. And so in my experiments and with dealing with subjects, I would just add very arbitrary questions about gender that may reveal something interesting. In fact, I think I found something interesting, but I think that it would have been necessary to share those data with an expert in the gender studies field to be sure that I'm applying the methods, the tools, and the indicators that makes this analysis scientific. Especially one more point that I believe is really important. We should connect with experts in the gender studies departments, and we should be required to, at least willing to be monitored by them, because we don't do gender studies research, but we can collect in every field that is non-gender specific. We can collect a ton of data that could be channeled, funneled back into the gender studies field and constitute a huge body of data that could be then used by the scholars in that field. So we are all acting for them, if you know what I mean. And so it's important to collect the data and reintegrate this data into the discourse of gender studies. The arbitrariness was the main challenge for me in the inclusion of gender in your research. When you think about it, give it a serious thought, because first of all, if it's obvious, if you have no justification whatsoever for the inclusion of gender in your research, this may play against you, because then it will only be something that you forced in to get more score in the evaluation. But most importantly, I think that if we really take this seriously, we believe that it's an issue, equality and all of this, and we believe in it, and we want to make a contribution for a positive change in the future, that we must be serious about it. So we must not just do it for the scores and the evaluation. We should ask ourselves, what am I contributing with? I stumbled across this concept of gender mainstreaming in one of the documents that I had read, and I quoted it in my proposal. Gender analysis is cross-integrated and macro, meso, and micro levels throughout the project cycle. This can be done, it is possible, but it does require from your part in your specific research a lot of thinking of what you can do. And the least you can do, I believe, is to say that you will collect data because you don't know what you're looking for yet. If this has not been done before, you don't have the question, you don't know what you're looking for exactly. In my case, you know, someone would have asked, do women design their interaction patterns with their works of art with the audience differently than men? Who knows, maybe. Sometimes it's a little bit of a racist question to even ask that. Do women do art differently than men? I don't know, but we can start just asking exploratory questions to collect the data. There is something there because there are differences in genders. And I would like to point out quite strongly that this is not just about women. It's very easy to fall into the opposite direction and to discriminate against men. And I believe that that does not agree with the definition of equality. And it's about also non-binary people and identities. So it's about men, it's about women, and every other color on the spectrum that has been actually included in the most recent documents. This is not just about women. In one of the documents, and then with my own thinking, I came up with the idea, and I write this in the article, that the issue should be formulated in terms of gender and human rights. And with my work, what I have been trying to do, even if it's a drop in the ocean, of course, is to bring a positive change in society in the long term, but in the short term, to bring the human factor back into the research. I also deal with mental health in academia, if some of you have seen my work. So to bring back the human factor in academia and to accelerate the healing process that many women and gender minorities are still going through, and that actually holds them back from developing full personal and professional lives. Implement gender in your research in a way that is credible and that yields useful results, not just as an embellishment, not without scientific support from it. Back it up with the science. Otherwise, you will not contribute to the cause, and you may even be accused of supporting the intrusion of feminist ideology into science. And we all care about science. So this is bottom line what I wanted to share with you. I will be available for the questions later on. I hope that this didn't sound like too much of a negative experience, but you can stay reassured that it was a very critical experience. Nonetheless, I put all of my reflections into this article because I found nothing else around, and I felt the urge to put it down. And actually, I was invited here to speak today because someone found it online, even after all of these years. So I believe that probably I've done my little bit of contribution, and good luck to all of you who want to write a proposal for next year.
Thank you so much, Federica. Thank you so much for your thoughts, for your passion, for sharing with us your path and your experience. Thank you so much. And it is a great pleasure to hear you, and your professionality is very high in this particular aspect of the Marie Curie fellowships. Thank you once again, Federica.